what is Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka's prime coastal property. It's paradise on earth, and over 20 years of civil war that it's been through, a lot of the poor came to the coastal areas and basically set up refuge there to make a living off the fishing industry. From Dust was made while I was living in the refugee camps around Sri Lanka, which had experienced a tsunami in December 2004. I'd gone there with a very small crew, my entire production equipment. And shortly after we got there, I mean, it was not as easy as we had expected, despite issues of filming and where to charge and sound and light. There are certain human issues that come into play that make you ask, what are you doing in a disaster zone with a camera and a crew when there are people who are basically searching for sustenance and for bodies. At least with two of our characters, that was the case. And the biggest battle that we had with the crew was that we didn't know what was the right subject, what was the right story, and really in this kind of scenario, no matter how much practice or film school or narrative or film training you go through, there's no way of really realizing what the right subject is. In a situation like this, it's just, you feel like I hate to say it, but you feel like a media whore in these kind of situations, just trying to pick out the right story. And that was our biggest conflict there. Eventually it came to a point that the crew left. They and the cinematographer shared his feelings with me and told me that he couldn't find his inspiration here. Which to date, I really do respect that still, and I really do understand what he meant. And in some ways, at that time, I also felt like perhaps this is not a place where a film should be made. But as I stayed on once the crew left, and as they left, the Sri Lankan government had just imposed a new law that was barring residential properties from being rebuilt within 100 meters of the ocean. And the Sri Lankan government said that this was a safety measure to protect people from another tsunami, and most people swallowed this and were more than willing to be relocated further inland because of the amount of fear that was driven into them. And I always felt that this law was questionable. That what is Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka's prime coastal property. It's paradise on earth, and over 20 years of civil war that it's been through, a lot of the poor came to the coastal areas and basically set up refuge there to make a living off the fishing industry. And the tsunami wiped out all these squatter villages along the entire coastline of the country. I mean, 80% of this coastline was hit, and along the entire coastline you've got these fishing villages. As the story develops, what happens is the Sri Lankan government enforces this 100-meter rule. They prevent aid workers and the locals from rebuilding their homes over there. And by the summer of 2005, they were selling this land and contracting it out to international buyers, namely hotel chains such as the Hyatt, the Sheraton, who began investing in Sri Lanka's coastline around early June is when it was. And from there began the story, which puts into question, what is the price of economic growth? And the focus of this film for me was that I realized that not a lot of the Western media has actually caught on to the fact that although that they are supporting the rebuilding process in Sri Lanka, none of that support is going towards rebuilding. It was actually going toward the tourism infrastructure that is, let's be honest, it's created for what reason? It's created for us. And these people are being moved off this prime land for us, because when we eat our breakfast at a 5-star hotel in the morning, you don't want to see the children of fishing villages going to the bathroom on the beach early in the morning.
What is the number of people on the coast who are affected, by this law?
According to my research, which is it's been spanned the course of a year now, the number should be about 325,000 people along the coast who are not allowed to rebuild. According to the Sri Lankan government, they're claiming it's only 85,000 people that are affected. However, that math doesn't really add up. 1 million people lost their homes along the coast. Now, of 1 million people, the majority the majority whose homes were destroyed live within the 100-meter area, and it corresponds to exactly as 1/3 of the population that was affected. The Sri Lankan government is just dousing its figures with, the problem is that there's actually no No NGO can give you an official stat on that number because no one's done a head count, and the Sri Lankan government's figures are not reliable. They're not to be believed based on what they're actually doing in that area.
There's another astounding statistic, isn't there? This was the highest amount of aid, relief aid. What was the figure exactly?
This was 3.5 billion US dollars were pledged to Sri Lanka. 1.5 were received. Of that 1.5, most of the money has gone towards infrastructure, tourism infrastructure, rebuilding the coastal highway to connect the tourism industry along the coast, energy, water, and it's basically showing that the money that was sent across into Sri Lanka has actually been reallocated into its own economy, particularly the real estate market. Due to the fact that most of these people were not allowed to rebuild homes, and the Sri Lankan government told them they would give them new land, and they never did, a lot of the monies that was sent for rebuilding by individuals, by NGOs, by aid organizations, it actually got redirected into buying land, because what was the point in buying bricks and mortar if you couldn't build? You had to buy land. So over the course of a year and a half now, those monies which have been received have now gone into the real estate market, into buying land for tsunami survivors who first lost their home and now have lost their land. Effectively, you are basically inflating the real estate market with $8.